Welcome to Read Between the Lines, a book podcast. I am your host, Molly Southgate, and today I'm interviewing
David Weber
and
Chris Kennedy.
Hi there. How are you doing today?
Well,
hey, doing great.
I'm doing fine, except I think I'm in another dimension on timing. But aside from that, all is good.
Excellent. So can you tell me about your books?
About our collaborative books, because we only have one of those.
Yes, but I know that you have more books outside of that too. So if you would like to talk a little bit about those too.
Okay, Chris.
Sure. Although I have a few traditionally published works. I'm predominantly an independent author and publisher. I've got about 30 books of my own, as well as 40 published short stories. Almost all of those are science fiction and fantasy. Also published over 200 other books through the various imprints of Chris Kennedy Publishing.
And unlike the pusher you were just talking to, I am simply a supplier. I have, 60, 70 traditionally published books out. I guess the two that people know me most for are the Honor Harrington series with Bain Books and the Safehold series with Tor. But I also have some fantasy scattered through there, primarily military science fiction, although I actually prefer to think of it almost as political science fiction because I spend so much time in the nuts and bolts of the politics of my various literary worlds.
All right. So actually, can you two talk a little bit about military science fiction, or as you said, political science fiction? Because I, before starting your book, had no idea that this was a genre. And I do not know how I did not know this, but...
Well, Into the Light actually bends genres just a tad.
Just a little.
Yeah. The only other thing I've got that really came close to that, I think, is In Fury Born, in which I pair a female commando with the last surviving Greek Fury. But military science fiction is science fiction which is primarily, in which the conflict is primarily centered around a military conflict, not simply social dynamics or philosophical. You actually have people shooting at each other pretty much in terms of it. The reason that I said political science fiction is that there's military science fiction. There's what I think of as militaristic science fiction. Tony Bain actually coined that term for me. Militaristic science fiction is written by people who just want to write something where a lot of people get shot. It's written by people who frequently don't understand how the military works at all in real life, or how politics impact the military. So when I'm writing military science fiction, I try to give the political background that is driving these people to do something as inherently not sane as shooting at other human beings, if you follow what I'm saying.
Yeah.
I typically just stay with the military side. I generally don't get into the politics as much. However, with 20 years of being a naval aviator, I do have a decent idea of how militaries work.
Oh, show off.
No. Okay.
And David does too. I mean, he's done so much research on military things that I'm sure he knows, a wide variety of militaries that I've never looked at. So,
Well, they're all pretty much the same under the skin in a lot of ways. Somebody just sent me a pay stub from a Roman legionnaire that they. I'm serious.
I saw that. No, I saw that thing.
Yes,
I know where you're going.
They excavated what's left of the pay slip of a Roman legionnaire from Israel from Masada. And it's all about what he had to pay the quartermaster for food and everything else. And it turns out that he got paid, he paid the quartermaster, and he was flat broke again. Some things don't change a lot.
Oh my. Okay, so you were talking a little bit about it already, but what does your collaboration process look like? And like, there's different perspectives in this book. Did one of you gravitate more towards one of the perspectives, or?
Okay, I do collaborations with quite a. I am somebody who is, in one sense, comfortable doing collaborations, and in another sense, not. I am not comfortable doing a collaboration in which somebody says, "Okay, I'm going to put my name on the book. You write it." If I'm going to be involved in a collaboration, I'm going to be hands-on, which Chris found out.
Well, and I expected it too. I mean, yeah. it was your series to start with.
Yeah.
And I'm kind of the squatter in it, so I knew that you would have many ideas for where the series was going to go and what it was going to look like. And I came in willing to work within that framework.
Yeah. Well, we had a fairly extensive series of conferences on what the book was going to be and where it was going to go. And as Chris is fond of pointing out, getting me to shut up is difficult. So I did a lot of the talking. But I think in this instance, we actually did more of dividing characters in some respects. And handing out different developmental threads. I did the first chapter. I try to usually do the first chapter in collaborations where I'm the senior partner, because I think the first chapter does so much to set the tone for where the entire book is going.
The first chapter is amazing, just by the way, if you haven't read it.
Yeah, it definitely is. Like, so, yeah, because I'm reading your book currently, and so far everything is incredible.
Well, and part of the problem is that when I wrote Out of the Dark, the first novel, I did not envision it as the first book in a series. I thought it was going to be a standalone. And
surprise!
I found,
what happened?
Yes, well, what happened was that I saw the cover copy from Tor that was like first book in a new series. And I was wait, guys, wait. What had happened was I'd written a novella, which was basically this from the first book, the section where our Marine Stephen Buchevsky meets Vlad and everything is going on in Romania. And Tom Doherty at Tor really liked it, so he asked me to expand it, and I expanded it off the front, not the back. And then it turned into the first book in a series. And I'm delighted with where this book came out. I am really pleased with it. I think Chris brought a lot to it in terms of I'm not sure exactly how to put it. When two writers work together, there are threads that flow together, not just in terms of the book, but in terms of the creative process and how things wind up finally gelling on the page. And there's a lot of Chris in the DNA from that perspective, as well as just the scenes that he specifically wrote. It's kind of like you riff off of each other.
Mm-hmm. Absolutely.
Okay. And so parts that I wrote were different because I was working with Chris and I was riffing off of what he had already done, just as he was doing with me. Collaborating is really a very intellectually intimate process if you do it right, I think. If you're not doing literary sharecropping or something like that. Well, that's
no. I know exactly what you're talking about, and I've seen literary sharecropping. I've seen an awful lot of it here recently, and this was truly a collaborative process. You after we talked a couple times, you set up a framework, an outline that we kind of went off, but then as we went forward, you do a chapter or two, I'd do a chapter or two. And a lot of times what one would do would cause the other person to go, oh, wait. Oh, yeah. I got that. Yeah. Now I need to go and do this thing over here because wouldn't it be cool if?
Yeah. And I think one thing that this collaboration, the collaborative process was we were doing chapters at a time in the same timeline and then passing it back and forth rather than somebody saying, okay, I'm going to write my section of the book, you write your section of the book, and then I'll fair it all together in the editing process. So since we were exchanging chapters as we went along, which is something the internet facilitates that you didn't used to be able to do, we were able to do that riffing off of one another in a more natural, flowing fashion than we might have otherwise.
All right. Were there ever any parts of the book where one of you was like, oh, I know exactly what's going to happen, and like you wrote like 3 chapters or like a bunch of it, and then went, oh no, I forgot to talk to the other person. Like, and like, did any of you, were there times where one of you went like wild on the book?
Well, as the senior editor, I'm going to take this one. As the senior editor, David 1 or 2 times, gave when it was his turn, threw in a surprise chapter, which he could do. Hey, I had this great idea, so I did this too. Okay, great. Typically, I did not, because as the junior author, I wanted to make sure that I stayed within the boundaries that I was, working under. So anytime I had something new, I typically bounced it off David first. And he always said, yeah, go ahead, do that. But, I didn't surprise him with by the way, here's this thing,
Yeah.
You expected a dog, but look, I gave you a rhinoceros.
Yes.
That's okay. That's okay. I can retcon that. I can work with that.
Yeah.
I think that's probably fair. One thing that is true for me when I'm doing collaborations is collaborations for me are usually more tightly plotted out than when I am doing a solo book. Because
you don't do 120,000 word plot summaries before every book?
No, just the tech Bible, Bible, Chris. But when you're collaborating with somebody else, you both need to have at least a general map of the terrain.
Yeah.
And especially when you're passing chapters back and forth the way that Chris and I were, I think you need to know where the other guy is headed and be headed to the same place yourself. If your collaborative work is going to smooth into one another as you go along. And so we had, as Chris said, we had chapter layout as we went along. And I departed from it in a few places, and Chris departed from it in a few places. But like he says, where he departed from it, he would send me an email or give me a call and say, hey, I'm working on chapter so-and-so, and I just had a thought. What if we do this instead or in addition? As he says, my response was generally, yeah, sure, go for it. Partly because that's what collaborations are, and partly because, generally speaking, it was a good idea. It's like, okay, fine, I'm not proud. It's a good idea. Let's put it in there.
Yeah. Okay, so your book essentially takes place in 2 worlds, because there's like the space alien part of it, and then there's the historical part of it. How did the world building process work for you?
When I wrote Out of the Dark, it was happening in my mind pretty much contemporaneously with what I was writing, in a slightly different dimension, so that I could create presidents, wasn't constrained by, do we like this guy or not, with who was currently in office. And so that's our starting point for building the world of Into the Light. And then I blew most of that world up in Out of the Dark. So we are putting it back together. I think both of us are students of the new dismal science, otherwise known as current affairs. And, we pay attention to that. And I trained as a military and diplomatic historian before I became a writer. That was what my graduate work was in, and what I was originally planning to teach at the college level. So that informs a lot of my thinking when I start rebuilding worlds that got blown apart or creating new ones. Chris?
Oh, absolutely. And my perspective is more from the military side, and in seeing how the military is controlled and how it operates under that control. And in following orders sometimes that, perhaps you may not agree with, so you try and work within the system to do the right thing, the things that are right, based on the orders that you've been given.
Yeah. Wow. Yeah. So this is kind of a totally different type of question, but who are your favorite science fiction authors that led some inspiration into this book or other books that you've written?
Contemporaneous or authors that we've read? In my case, the misty days of our youth.
Either, honestly. Yeah, either.
Okay. Chris, check me on this, but one of the things that happens when you are a full-time writer is that you are no longer a full-time reader.
The only reason that I'm a full-time reader as well as a full-time author is I read everything that I publish. So I'm typically reading a book a week, that's being published. So I read a lot more than probably the traditional author who's working to put his own words, on the paper.
Well, part of it is I tell people that I think you have X amount of creative energy, and you can use it writing 5,000 words or reading 50,000. Mm-hmm. And so you have to kind of allocate. So my current reading list is a little thin. The authors who probably had the greatest impact on me would include Robert Heinlein, H.B. Piper, Keith Laumer, Andre Norton, not Asimov so much. I never really got into Asimov. But those are the folks that I was reading when I was realizing that okay. For those of you who remember him, Doc Ed Smith, who pretty much, I think, created grand scale space opera. That's who I was. The very first science fiction author that I ever read was Jack Williamson, who I then had the pleasure of meeting many years later. I read his Legion of Space when I was about 10 years old, and the next book that I read was Sprague de Camp and P. Schuler Mitchell, who were two more who had a major effect on me. Their book, Genus Homo, which is really kind of, I think, the inspiration for Planet of the Apes. But that's who shaped me. Now, I've read a ton of other writers since then. But I am currently in that, I can only read so much kind of thing. And I'm devoting a lot of my energy to the Liaden universe, which is wonderful. But Chris, what about you in terms of writers that shaped you?
Writers that shaped me, pretty much all of the writers that write for Bain, typically. John Ringo, Larry Correa. I'm going to brown nose and say I grew up reading David Weber.
Oh, thank you.
I know he hates when I say that. He hates when I say that, and it's not really. I mean, I didn't grow up. I'm not that much younger than
I would assume that he would. Yeah.
But most of my adult life, I've been reading David, and I know David always says that, who you are as an author depends on who you were as a reader. And I think that that's probably why, I'm able to write with David, is that I've read an awful lot of David Weber and loved it all. And I'm going to have to give a shout out to my other writing partner, Mark Wandry, who I like a lot of the stuff he does. And Casey Azell, one of my contemporaries, who reading her probably makes me a better author. In going for the gut punch.
Well, there's a reason. There's a reason that I gave the Secretary of War in Into the Light. Why her first name is Casey.
Yeah.
And used to be a helicopter pilot. Yeah, I'm just saying.
Still is.
Yes. Well, but not the one.
Oh, the Minister of War. Yeah.
Yeah.
Right. Yeah. There was a bad thing that happened.
Yeah.
We don't talk
spoilers.
about bad things.
Yeah. Yeah, I definitely agree with what both of you said, because Chris, you were just quoting David. But the thing about it, how it makes you, what you read can make you like a better author. Like it shapes you in that way. I find that 100%.
I think every writer's voice is a fusion of every writer that writer has ever read, plus whatever it is that made him or her a storyteller in the first place. And the broader your foundation, the stronger your foundation.
Mm-hmm. Definitely.
I'd agree with that.
So,
and I would say that one of the really main benefits from my side with getting to write with David is I learned a lot about how he goes about writing too. And working with him, definitely has made me a better writer on my own. So, that's an unintended consequence of this was getting to see what David does on a daily basis. And I thought I worked hard before, I worked with David, and now I know what hard work looks like.
Oh.
Well, until you have COVID, then you can't concentrate, so you're not doing anything.
Okay, I've probably outritten you the last month. But,
that's true. That's true. Well, I will say this. One of the reasons that I do collaborations with Chris, with Jacob Holo, with Richard Fox. We have collaboration coming from Bain shortly. I've been doing this for 30 plus years. And in the process, I've learned some things. And one thing that I want to do is, and those skills are perishable. They go away when I do. And so I am trying to find some folks who are either new authors or who are recently become full-time authors or whatever, who I think have the potential to be main list authors, and do collaborations with them in part in sort of a mentoring role. I mean, that sounds pretentious, but I want to give exposure to writers who I think deserve it, and who may be able, because for whatever reason, I have a fairly large established readership. If they do a collaboration with me, they're going to get before a lot of other people who might not have seen them the way that they deserve to be seen. And that's a big part of what this book was all about.
And I think that, David was lamenting one time, where are the old guys? And someone mentioned to him that perhaps he was now one of them. And he has done an outstanding job, with mentoring. And I know that I have benefited from it, incredibly, and as has Jacob, and I'm sure Richard did as well.
Someday I'll tell you about John Ringo's first collaboration with me. Yeah. But yeah, I think that you have a responsibility to kind of pay it forward, not just in writing, but in life in general. And it was Tony Weisskopf is who you were thinking of, Chris. I was lamenting after Poul Anderson died. I said, they're all gone. And she said, who's all gone? I said, the old guard's all gone. Paul Anderson's gone, Sprague de Camp, Jack Williamson was still alive, but he was older than God,
Oh.
I said, they're all gone. And she said, no, the old guard's fine. And I said, what are you talking about? She said, you're the old guard. And I said, no. I will be the middle guard. I'm not the old guard. But unfortunately, now I am the old guard, I guess,
Oh.
But he wears it very well, and he has the personality to take that on, as you could see there, and to do great things to help the next generation. And that's
Chris, okay. I'll see if we can add another book to that.
No, I that's something that's important. That's something that's important to me too. And I'm not the middle guard or old guard or whatever, but we do a lot of anthologies. And I always try and cut out 3 or 4 positions for new authors or authors that are, good and need a start so that we can get, some publicity for them as well. And it's the same kind of thing, when you pay it forward, I think everybody wins.
Yeah.
Writing is not a zero-sum game. Okay. It's not necessary for you to not succeed for me to succeed. And I think that that's something that is handy about our field, in that we don't have to guard our turf or our rice bowl or whatever. And I think most storytellers, most successful writers are successful because they're storytellers. And they would tell stories and they would write, whether anybody paid them for it or not. Isaac Asimov used to say that was his greatest fear, that the publisher one day would figure out that he'd write whether they paid him or not. I think that for those of us who succeed at the craft, and I think it is a craft, but for those of us who succeed at it, that's really not an inaccurate description. It's something that we're kind of driven to do. I'm not saying that you have to have this compulsive demon in the back of your brain driving you, but it's just a part of who you are, or else you can't sustain it.
I agree with you 100%. When I put out my first book, I had a guy from one of my old squadrons who reached out to me and he said, "You're now a published author?" And I said, "Yeah." And he said, so let me see if I've got this right. You're just telling stories like you used to do at the squadron all the time, but now you're getting paid for it? And I said, "Why, yes, I am." And he's like, "How do I get that gig?"
Yeah.
Well, it's true. Now, it is, like I said, it's a craft. Okay, so the fact that you have the storyteller bug doesn't mean that you'll succeed at it, but it means that you won't succeed if you don't have it. If you see what I'm saying, which is a somewhat different thing. But people ask me, how did you learn to write? And I look at them and I say, how did you learn to walk? And they usually give me, I didn't ask the Zen master look. But what I'm saying is that when you learn to walk, you fall down a lot. And every time you fall down, you learn a little bit more about keeping your balance the next time. It's kind of that way with writing. You make a lot of mistakes. Back in the pre-electronic days when I began doing it, you put a lot of stuff in the trash can. Now you delete a lot of files. Or you save them and go back and say, boy, do I do better than that now? But it's a craft that you learn by doing. And if you are going to succeed at it, you have to be, I think, your own most critical editor. But you need that editorial input too, I think, to continue to perfect your craft. And you're never done. You're never done. I'm still learning things today. about it. And that's another reason I do collaborations, is because I do collaborations with somebody I think who may have something to teach me or give me an alternate writer's viewpoint that I wasn't working with before.
Yeah.
It is one of the joys of what I do for a living, that I can do it with other people. And sometimes it's a pain in the butt too. I mean, Chris was not one of them, but there are times, even with somebody who you've done collaborations with, and the books are very successful, and you've enjoyed almost all of it. There can be that one spot where what you really are thinking is, boy, it is so good that you are in Jersey, because I can't reach you right this minute. But but that's simply because human beings, we have good days, we have bad days. Okay, and that's true of our writing too. I've had not in this collaboration with Chris, but I was doing a collaboration with another writer. And I'm looking at it, and I sent him an email, and I said, "You remember those 7 chapters that I did?" And he was like, "Yeah." I said, "Well, they're all dreck. I'm trashing them all. I'm going to have to start over." He says, "But I just did 3 chapters off of those 7 chapters." I said, "Well, sorry about that. These suck. We're going to have them over again."
No.
And he was like, "Okay." It's a good thing you're in Jersey, because
Oh my gosh.
Right now. But it happens. It happens.
Yes. Okay, well, thank you so much, both of you, for coming on. I just have one final question for you today, and that is, what do you have coming up?
Well, okay. Collaboratively, Chris and I just finished spending 10 days in the hospital with COVID.
Oh, I'm so sorry.
That was like several weeks ago, but I'm still having trouble getting back up to speed. One of the things I'm having trouble getting back up to speed with is that Chris and I need to have a conference on the sequel to Into the Light so we can get it launched. That's the next thing that we have coming out jointly. We haven't started on it yet, so I'm guessing that it'll probably be at least a year from now, minimum, before it's actually hitting the shelves. I've got a bunch of stuff going on with other collaborators. Richard Fox, I mentioned. Jacob Holo, I mentioned. I've got 3 or 4 solo projects that are hanging fire while I get myself back into writing mode again.
Tough to not have anything to do, huh?
Yeah. It's just sitting here wondering what I tell people that I'm never, ever going to get all the stories that I want to tell told. But that's better than not having a story idea and a contract. Yeah,
absolutely.
Yeah. All right, so Chris, you got a lot going on through your imprints too.
Yeah, I do. I typically launch about a book a week. This week we have 2. For myself, I'm working on Eye of the Storm, which is the next book in our 4 Horsemen universe. That's a multi-author universe. Currently has 63 books. So, if you're looking for a good long series, that's it. That one will be out in April. I also have a short story and a fantasy anthology, Songs of Valor, which David's is also in.
Yeah, mine's a little weird, but okay, it's in there.
Yeah. So when he says he does military, he also does fantasy, and that's a fantasy story that I'm publishing, and he's in there. A lot of good folks in that. That book was originally developed for the convention Fantasy, which is now going to have to drop back a couple months, but the book is still coming out March 19th, and that's going to be a good one.
Awesome. Once again, thank you so much for Read Between the Lines. My name is Molly Southgate.
He's David Weber, and I'm Chris Kennedy.
Let's end this the way all great stories end. Happily ever after?
The end.
Yeah.
Thank you for listening to Read Between the Lines, a book podcast. This episode is hosted by Molly Southgate. It is edited by Rob Southgate and produced by Southgate Media Group. You can get in touch with the show at readbetweenthelines@gmail.com Or you can send us a voicemail at 708-887-9473. That was 708-887-9473. You can also find us on Instagram at Read Between the Lines Podcast. Thank you so much for listening.